Hello and welcome to the Rogers Brief. I'm Adam Rogers. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Yesterday was day 40 of the Mass Casualty Commission proceedings, and I'm doing my report the morning after. So a little late. I got a chance to watch the proceedings, not live, but on the recorded live stream. So that's very helpful as a resource, of course. Even though the subject matter of the proceedings yesterday, there were two things. There was a panel discussion, 8 people, which is quite a few for a panel, on communications interoperability among police agencies and other entities. And then there was an expert presentation on supporting survivors in the aftermath of a tragedy of shooting like this. And so there's a presentation at the end of the day on that. There's an expert paper as well available. But the main focus of everybody's attention over the last few days has remained on this brewing political controversy centered on the Commissioner of the RCMP, Brenda Lucki. And she's been the subject of that criticism after some notes from Superintendent Darren Campbell, high-ranking RCMP officer in Nova Scotia, were disclosed this week, 4 pages that were not available earlier for some reason, which we'll get to that in a minute. So in these notes, was revealed that Commissioner Lucki was trying to compel the Nova Scotia RCMP into revealing the make and model of the firearms that Gabriel Wortman used during the shooting spree. The Nova Scotia RCMP rejected that direction and just said that some firearms were found, didn't give the make and model, and used as their explanation the excuse that they didn't want to jeopardize an ongoing investigation. So this has been created controversy because the notes suggested that Commissioner Lucki was receiving direction from Prime Minister Trudeau or his office and federal public safety minister, Bill Blair. Bill Blair, the person, along with Minister Mark Fury, who originally came out and said there could be a review done, not a full inquiry, and had to be pressured into that. So that's sort of the setup. And Commissioner Lucki has been under fire since this revelation a few days ago now. But I think people have it wrong when it comes to Commissioner Lucki, her role in all this. So I'll start first. I know people are offended that there would even be discussions of, here's a tragedy and, what are we going to say? And, that there would even be a consideration of the politics of a scenario in that kind of an event. Well, as someone from Generation X, with a Generation X mentality, I'm not surprised in the least that these sorts of political discussions would be taking place in the immediate aftermath of a major event, and probably particularly a tragic event such as this. Indeed, I think it would be shocking if no such discussions were taking place at the political level among the political entities involved. Gun control has been deployed as a wedge issue by the federal Liberals in particular for fundraising purposes, vote-getting purposes for many years now. And so I'm not surprised that they tried to use this event for their own political purposes. Now, is that a bad thing? Well, not necessarily. A tragic event can be a powerful agent for change. It can be an agent for good change. We see the George Floyd protests and all that arising from a tragic event, and many good things can come from that after the event. Of course, you don't want the event to happen. But once it does, the change can take place. But it needs to emerge naturally from the event in order to be effective. Here, that wasn't the case. The political decision makers, Trudeau and Blair, miscalculated, misread the situation, and gave poor direction to Commissioner Lucki, who then passed that on. Okay, the issue here wasn't the type of firearms that the killer had. He didn't purchase them legally. He obtained them illegally, appears to have gotten them smuggled across the Canada-US border into Nova Scotia. So that would seem to be where the focus should be on that element of it, the cross-border, the smuggling, the illegal obtaining of firearms, not the particular kind. But Trudeau and Blair, they had this legislation banning certain firearms to make it look like they're doing something about it. But that's their mistake, and they need to own that mistake. It is not the mistake of Commissioner Lucki, who's involved in this, but as a subordinate in the political element of it. When you have an event of this nature, there is an elevated opportunity for positive change, but with that elevated opportunity also comes the risk. If you miscalculate the situation, you end up looking crass, as they do here. You end up looking like you're taking advantage of an opportunity in a negative sense to forward your own pre-existing agenda. So that's the risk. That's the mistake they made. And now, of course, the political masters, Blair and Trudeau, are denying this. Wouldn't believe that denial for a second. Maybe they can deny it in the technical sense. Well, maybe it wasn't the Prime Minister himself. It was somebody in his office. Whatever. That's irrelevant. The direction came from them, and that's where the blame has to stay. At least Commissioner Lucki in this case was on the side of disclosure. That is a rare, as opposed to concealment. That is a rare instinct within the RCMP. Everybody else involved in that discussion, Superintendent Campbell, Leah Scanlon, others that were involved in the meeting that took place, the video meet conference, all apparently were happy to keep that information from citizens, the nature of the firearms that the killer had. During the Mass Casualty Commission, that has proven to be one of the main issues about the RCMP is this institutional instinct to secrecy. So everybody else wanted to keep the information secret. Commissioner Lucki was prepared to reveal it. Now, the explanation given by Superintendent Campbell in his notes is, and in the I think in the press conference as well, why aren't you revealing the nature of these firearms, is you don't want to jeopardize an ongoing investigation. Okay, well, how's that going? The explanation may seem sensible at first glance, but doesn't really stand up to scrutiny in this case. It's been over 2 years now, and nobody has been charged with firearms smuggling, providing weapons illegally to somebody without a license, any of those things. With these minor charges on supplying ammunition, which were completely unrelated to the core issue of obtaining firearms from the United States illegally, smuggling them across the border illegally, possessing them illegally. So what's the ongoing investigation? Nobody's been charged in 2 years. So whatever goal that the RCMP had in mind with to keep yet another secret from us has not appeared to have panned out. So it's worth looking at that explanation with some degree of skepticism. And, people that have been following the Mass Casualty Commission closely or following my reports will know that the RCMP have been facing heavy criticism about their performance, not only during the events, but maybe even more so for their post-tragedy performance communications with the public. Their inability to communicate really with anyone, whether it's on an individual level with the families or on a broader level with the general public, in providing information about what took place and their investigation. So, even this past week, we've seen, the release of the videos from the Enfield Big Stop. And if you've read Paul Palango's article, in which I was heavily quoted, thanks to Paul for that, a great article in Frank Magazine just a few days ago, talking about the release of those videos and how they seem to contradict, or potentially at least contradict, the heroic narrative of the officers who just happened to show up to gas up with under half a tank of gas, just under half a tank of gas, according to his testimony, and heroically ended the active shooter situation by killing Gabriel Wortman there at the Big Stop. Well, for many, those have called that the video release has called those actions into some doubt. And so here is another, and Paul really lays this out well, an attempt to distract from that news by here's this other big news. Hey, look at the commissioner of the RCMP. Don't think about those videos and what they may reveal. Look over here at the shiny commissioner of the RCMP and the news story that comes from that. Now, as it so happens, just sort of randomly, I guess, but I've met Brenda Lucki briefly in 2017. I've my old roommate from university became an instructor at Depot, and so a bunch of us went out for a visit. We get together every once in a while, so we went to Regina 2017, went to a Riders game, a very cold one, and got a tour of Depot. So I remember at the time, actually, there was a delegation from Ukraine there, Ukrainian judges that were studying policing or judicial system, all that sort of thing, which I remember thinking at the time was a very good thing for them to be doing. Showed some progressive instincts in the Ukrainian government, so take that for what it is. But we met Brenda Lucki, who was the head of Depot at the time. She showed us around her office, was very gracious to us. She had really no reason to be, but she took some time to talk to us and was, like I say, very gracious. And my impression from spending a few days around there was that she was well respected in that role. So, I take that in mind as I think about her role or her perception in this brewing controversy. But I think the release of these notes now, timed as they are particularly, but even just the content of them, I think it seems to be, to me, an attempt by someone to sacrifice Commissioner Lucki in favor of the overall RCMP brand. So, all right, listen, okay, the commissioner will be gone and the RCMP will continue. But I think that's both insufficient, first of all, but also I think personally unfair. I think it'll emerge to be personally unfair to the commissioner herself. Because the evidence that's been emerging so far in the Mass Casualty Commission has been that the hierarchical structure of the RCMP and, multiple commanders giving decisions, hey, we can't just react to this, we have to bring in our critical incident package and set up a command center and do all these things before we do anything. That's been the issue that's been emerging. And also, that coupled with the institutional mistrust that the RCMP has of us as citizens. They wouldn't release an emergency alert, wouldn't release information, didn't think they could trust us to act responsibly, even though the evidence has pointed completely in the other direction to say that people would behave responsibly in a tragic circumstances given some information. All right, so that was, I should talk about the proceedings themselves for a moment. Not particularly compelling. The interoperability discussion was all about, try to get the latest technology, make sure it's not too complex because you need to use it under trying circumstances. If you're working with other agencies, or if you expect to, you should train together and make sure everybody knows what they're doing. Make sure you do lots of training exercises to get all that straight. The supporting survivors expert, there was nothing really terribly new or groundbreaking about her presentation. Many people can have different experiences of tragedy. They should be supported. It's important to get in there right away, but also there can be long-term consequences, and all of that should be certainly supported. And it's in addition to professional help, very important for survivors to be able to talk to one another and maintain those relationships, which I know many of the survivors in this case have been doing, and their family members. So those are all healthy reactions and ways to recover. So that was all interesting, but of course, yes, the focus of everybody's attention has been this political controversy and Commissioner Brenda Lucki. But my thought is that when it comes to her actions, people have the wrong target. That it appears to be an orchestrated attempt to undermine her leadership as a way to solidify or at least preserve the RCMP brand and their viability as a contract policing entity in Nova Scotia, and then, of course, throughout the country is, of course, if things go badly here in Nova Scotia, that's going to have national reverberations for the RCMP. So I'm sure they're very conscious of that. Ironic and suspicious that the notes only came out this past week, as other issues, major issues for the RCMP were brewing, and it just seems like a distraction from those things. And so we'll see. It'd be very interesting to hear Commissioner Lucki when she testifies, and Superintendent Campbell as well, who's not even been interviewed by the Mass Casualty Commission as of yet. So those are my thoughts. Maybe a little contrarian to the the main line of thinking when it comes to Commissioner Lucki, but I think this is right. So I'd be interested to hear everybody's reaction to that, and we'll see how that goes. The commission is back on next Tuesday, I believe the 28th, and we'll be watching that then, and we'll report back to you then. If anything happens in the meantime, I'll come back with my thoughts as well. So until then, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.